James Gray.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much indeed for calling me, and thank you very much to you and to Mr. Speaker for selecting the amendment which stands in my name and in a goodly number of honourable and right honourable people from across the chamber. Thank you too for allowing a goodly amount of time for this important and useful debate. I don't intend to take up much of the House's time because there have been a number of very useful speeches so far which have addressed most of the important arguments on both sides of the debate. I very much agree with my right honourable friend, the member for East Yorkshire, who started the debate off by saying that this is a matter of taste and discretion and delicacy. These are not passionate arguments on either side. One side is not definitely right and the other side definitely wrong. It's a matter of how we handle these machines, what we use them for, what their purpose is, and how we make sure the debate in this chamber is as good as it possibly can be. And if I may say so, today's debate on this particular issue has been amongst the highest, as is often the case when we're discussing matters that affect ourselves. The debate has in fact been amongst the highest quality of many that I've heard in recent weeks. From my honourable friend, whose report, and the committee was split on the report, 4 of us have signed the amendment disagreeing with the report. From his stance, which is that virtually any electronic device can be used for virtually any purpose, either in the chamber or in committee, through to the right honourable gentleman, the former Deputy Speaker, whose broad view is, and he is by no means a dinosaur in this matter, his broad view is that these devices should not be used for any purpose whatsoever. And I have to tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that one letter I received from a very senior member of this House, with which I would not necessarily agree, said that he felt that the rules applying this House should be precisely the same as the rules applying at the opera, namely that we shouldn't use them at all. And there's some sense in that, although I would not necessarily myself agree with it. I would also not necessarily. I would also, if I may, pick up the. I shan't give you a song if that's all right. I feel that my voice doesn't rise to that. Also, don't quite agree, if I may just pick her up on it, with the honourable lady, the member for Wavertree, who was focused on the particular use of electronic devices for Twitter. Now, it is right that in my email, which I sent to all honourable members, I did mention Twitter and blogging and suggest that those are things we should probably not use. Although I will come back in a moment to suggest a way in which we might be able to use them, if that's all right. I'm not necessarily totally opposed to the notion of twittering. But the main thrust of my amendment, the main thrust of my thoughts on these matters, and a great many honourable members who have spoken to me about it, the main thrust of our thought is that if we allow unfettered use of these devices, basically 3 things will happen. Now, the first is that the quality of debate will decline. And perhaps I could just use an example, an occasion recently when I was chairing a committee stage of a public bill upstairs, and glancing around the room, some 2/3 of the people on the committee were at that moment using electronic devices for one purpose or another. I have to say that included both the Shadow Minister and the Minister, both whips, and about 6 or 8 backbenchers, one of whom, rather magically, was using 2 electronic devices simultaneously. How on earth they managed to do that, I have simply no idea. Now, it seemed to me that the fine technical points with regard to the pensions bill, for that's what it was, were not necessarily being considered carefully by the 2/3 of the members of the committee who were using the machines at that time. I would suggest that had I challenged the committee to lay out precisely what it was the current Speaker had just said, a very large percentage of them would have looked at me particularly blankly and really wouldn't have the faintest idea what's going on. I totally accept the point that my neighbour, the member for Devizes, made a moment ago, which is we can all multitask. Of course we can all multitask, no question about that at all. That's something that MPs do all the time. But I simply don't believe that the finer points of argument in debate will necessarily be picked up if you're focusing your mind on something else. The purpose in debate is not just for our own voices to be heard, it's not just to get something off the record. We could do that by handing the speech in, as they do in the United States of America. The purpose in debate is to listen carefully to what the other person is saying, and to pick the other person up on fine illogicalities in their speech, to make delicate points about debate, and hopefully to come some kind of useful conclusion about it. I do not believe that if you are focusing on emptying your inbox, surfing the net, maybe twittering, maybe who knows what else, and there's a famous example in Italian Parliament recently where a member was spotted surfing an escort site on his well, of course, I'm happy to do so. If we are doing all of those things while we are theoretically listening carefully to the debate, then I don't believe that we're actually taking part in the debate in the way that we should be. Happy to give way, my old friend.
Grateful to the Honourable Friend for giving way. I think the point, the crux of the issue has been touched upon. In the Welsh Assembly, for example, every member sits in front of a computer. Now, earlier this year, the Conservative Assembly member for North Wales, Brynley Williams, passed away at a very young age. And one of the tributes paid to him by a Labour member, actually, he said on the radio, Brynley Williams, when he spoke in the chamber, we stopped working on our computers and we listened. And isn't that the real issue, the crux of the issue here?
The Honourable Gentleman makes an extremely good point, and it's useful to know his experience in watching in the Welsh Assembly, where this has happened, and elsewhere around the world we've seen examples of all kinds of parliaments where people excessively make use of these things and therefore are not taking proper part in the debate. I'm passed a message here by paper from the Whip, who reminds me that I need to say, most grateful to the Whip, had she done it electronically I wouldn't have got it. She reminds me to say that I beg to move the amendment be made. I do indeed do so. Now that very useful intervention from my honourable friend on the front bench leads me to the second reason why I feel uneasy about unfettered use of electronic devices. And that is that whereas at the moment outside interests, including, dare I say it, the Whip's office, may have some influence over what we do or we say or how we vote in this place, by and large, they have to have that influence in writing and prior to the debate. I just feel it would be particularly unhelpful if during a speech or if during the course of debate, outside interests, lobbyists, businesses, groups of all kinds, were to get in touch with us in the chamber on our electronic devices and saying, I think you should ask the Minister such and such a question because that's a weak point in our argument, or I think you should be doing this, or I think you should be doing that. I think we should be listening carefully to the logic of the other person's speech and seeking to counter that argument, not because a lobbying company has asked to do so, not because the Whip's office has asked to do so, but because we believe that to be something that we actually want to do ourselves. Of course, having your way, honourable friend.
Does my honourable friend not accept that that is actually possible under the rule as it stands now? It is actually perfectly possible under the rules of the House for somebody to receive the message and check it, and so that in fact could happen right now.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and if that were to happen, I would decry it. The purpose in my amendment is to say that the use of these electronic devices should be for the purposes of the matter under debate and for no other purpose. And I think just seeing a chamber full of people blogging and twitting and surfing the net would risk bringing the chamber into dispute. Now, of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, but would he not agree that one of the reasons MPs exist is so that people can lobby them with a view to influencing Parliament? That seems to be one of the reasons we're here.
My old friend's absolutely right, and I myself was, of course, a professional lobbyist for a number of years, so I have no difficulty with that whatsoever. And of course it's right that all sorts of interest groups around the world, journalists and lobby groups and all sorts of organisations do indeed make their views known to us. I'm just not certain about the propriety of a lobby group or the Whips or anybody else getting in touch with us during the course of debate and saying, actually, here's an interesting point you ought to raise, perhaps during a select committee. Would it be right, really, for people during a select committee cross-examination of the Murdochs, for example, or outside interest groups to get in touch with us via our electronic devices and say, here's something I think you ought to say? I think that would seem to me to be an unreasonable intervention in our internal debates here by outside influences, of course.
I'm very grateful.
I do give way, of course. I'm absolutely certain that what the honourable gentleman who is about to intervene said during the Select Committee cross-examination of the Murdochs was, of course, entirely his own idea, and absolutely irrespective of what outside interest might have said to him.
Well, I wasn't on the Select Committee, but that's just one minor factual inaccuracy in several others that we're passing by. But the point I was going to make to him was that one of the oldest rights that the members of the public and the constituents have had is the right to come to the lobby and demand that we come out of a debate to listen to their point of view. So I don't see what the difference is.
The difference, of course, is extremely simple. The equivalent of having an electronic device with someone outside speaking to us would be a member of the public not coming to Central Lobby and asking to speak to us on a green form. It would be the equivalent of a member of the public coming into this chamber and saying, would the Honourable Gentleman please ask this question here? I don't believe that's right. I think we should be debating amongst ourselves and not excessively involving outside people. Now, there are two or three objections. I think most people would agree that excessive use of electronic devices is not a good thing. But there are two or three objections that have been particularly raised with me. The first is this question of the fact that we all have to sit here for 6 or 7 hours before we're finally called to speak in some debate. Well, I think that could be corrected, A, by taking a greater interest in the debate itself. But secondly, I think that we could perhaps move towards a system enjoyed at the other end of the House where other end of the Palace, where they do in fact have some kind of indication in advance as to when they would speak. And you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and other of your colleagues do tend to give an indication of when that will be. But the notion that we should sit here clearing our inboxes or writing an article for the local paper on our devices because we're a bit bored and we can't be bothered to listen to the debate seems to me to be a thin argument. Of course.
I'm extremely grateful. He makes his case very powerfully, although I don't necessarily agree with it. Isn't the key issue here that the way in which we can best engage in debate is by being here in this chamber engaging in the debate? If we're outside doing the work, clearing the inbox he gave the example of, we can't be present listening to those arguments. And I agree with him. I think more people should be in this chamber more often, and I believe that his amendment will prevent that.
On the contrary, my amendment encourages members who are sitting here in this chamber to make use of their electronic devices for purposes connected with the debate. And that seems to be the important point with regard to the amendment. The last point, I think, which the main objection which is raised, is that my amendment would be very difficult to police. And you yourself, Mr Deputy Speaker, sent a letter out in July this year saying that while it would be difficult to police any such ban on the use of handheld devices for things other than those things referring to the debate, it would nonetheless be down to the individual discretion and decency of honourable members not to use it. In this place we have all kinds of conventions, all kinds of rules which all of us observe. They don't have to be written down, they don't have to be policed. They are the fact of the matter is they are things that we agree to do, and I think this is one of them. It seems to me, Mr Deputy Speaker, that if we were to allow the Procedure Committee's report to be agreed as it's printed, we would land up with a room full of members of Parliament staring at the devices, as I can see 3 or 4 doing as I look around the chamber at this moment. We'd land up with an entire room full of people staring at the devices, and I suspect those looking in from outside, whether that be from the public gallery or whether it be from the television screens, would be saying, what are those people doing? We used to object to the fact that the chamber was too empty. Now maybe it has filled up a little bit more, but look at them all. They're sitting there playing with their electronic devices. I think it brings the whole nature of debate in this place into some disrepute. I'd like to see the standard of debate here maintained. We are the mother of parliaments. Let us engage with each other in detailed and logical debate, and let us not spend excessive amount of time on our electronic devices.